We have the great honor this morning of not only having a simcha in our community, but also having a scholar in residence. And so as I did last night, I'm going to read Gil Troy's official biography. Distinguished scholar in North American history at McGill University, currently living in Jerusalem. Gil Troy is an award-winning American presidential historian and a leading Zionist activist. He is most recently the editor of the new 3-volume set Theodore Herzl Zionist Writings, the inaugural publication of the Library of the Jewish People. 2 years ago, he and Natan Sharansky co-authored Never Alone, Prison, Politics, and My People. This memoir-festo, or manifestoir as they call it, was published by Public Affairs of Hatchet. This summer, an updated paperback will appear. In the foreword to Troy's best-selling instant classic, The Zionist Ideas, Visions for the Jewish Homeland Then, Now, Tomorrow, Natan Sharansky writes, "This magnificent work is the perfect follow-up to Arthur Hertzberg's classic, The Zionist Idea. Combining, like Hertzberg, a scholar's eye and an activist's ear, Gil Troy demonstrates that we now live in a world of Zionist ideas with many different ways to help Israel flourish as a democratic Jewish state." Recently designated as an Algerminer J100, one of the top 100 people positively influencing Jewish life today, Troy wrote The Age of Clinton, America in the 1990s, and 10 other books on the American presidency. One leading historian called Age of Clinton the best book on the man and his times. Troy edited and updated another classic, the multi-volume History of American Presidential Campaigns, originally edited by Arthur Schlesinger Jr. and Fred Israel. He is now writing new essays on the 2012 and 2016 elections. Troy's book, Moynihan's Moment, America's Fight Against Zionism as Racism, describes the fall of the UN, the rise of Reagan, and the spread of anti-Zionism. Jewish Ideas Daily designated it one of 2012's best books. He appeared as a featured commentator on CNN's popular multi-part documentaries, the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s. He was just interviewed for the 2010s. He has been interviewed on most major North American TV and radio networks. Troy has published essays in the American, Canadian, and Israeli media, including writing essays for the New York Times campaign stops in 2012 and 2016. He wrote a weekly column for the Daily Beast, Secret Lives, putting current events in historical perspective, and currently writes a weekly column for the Jerusalem Post. We learn in Pirkei Avot the wisdom of our fathers. Aseh lecha rav ukneh lecha chaver. Appoint for yourself a teacher, acquire for yourself a friend. I am lucky in Gil Troy, I have found both. It's our honor to welcome Gil Troy to Valley Beth Shalom.
Boker Tov, Shabbat Shalom, Mazal Tov. Indeed, I flew in from Jerusalem just a few days ago. And you know, when you land, they ask you at customs, do you have anything to declare? He didn't know what he was dealing with. I wanted to say yes. I'm carrying the burdens of the Jewish people. I'm carrying the traumas of Israel. I'm carrying the sense of betrayal we all have for the lack of support, the lack of understanding, the double standards, the hatred, the insensitivity. But I'm also carrying the glory of our Israeli soldiers and the beauty of our Shabbatot and the grandeur of our tradition. But instead I just said I have nothing to declare. But it was hard. It's hard being here, especially because the last time I checked my iPhone right before Shabbat, there was growing anxiety in Israel and among my family about what would happen. Would the Iranians respond? Would the Americans still have our back? So I want to start with Hakarat Tov, with acknowledgement of the good. Thank you so much for lifting my soul. Thank you so much for your amazing welcome. Thank you so much for this beautiful bat mitzvah. And if I could join the pylon of brachot, the pylon of blessings, because there are never enough. And Elise, I know you think you're 13. but you're actually much older. You're 13 plus 76, which is the number of years we've been living this amazing adventure called the State of Israel. You're 13 plus whatever number of years your various parents and grandparents and great-grandparents have lived in this amazing country. You're 13 plus 248, which is the amazing story of the American people since 1776, and I count my American history since 1776. And of course, you're 13 plus 3,500 years old. And that gives us perspective. That gives you perspective. That allows us to say that while we may be going through difficult times, and yes, it was a difficult week, we know we will survive. We know we are the eternal people. We know we're playing the long game, and we can put the pain and the failure and the loss in perspective. And your mother said something very beautiful and profound. She said, you're a part of this people, you're never alone. And as you heard from that beautiful introduction, that's a very powerful phrase for me. Because I had the privilege a few years ago of co-writing a book with Natan Sharansky. Natan Sharansky was a Soviet Jewish refusenik, thrown in jail in the Gulag, in the vast Soviet prison camp. For 13 years was his official sentence, and he ended up serving 9 years. And his line is, he said, I served 9 years in Gulag, 9 years in Israeli politics, 9 years in Jewish agency, leading Jewish community. I don't know where I suffered most. No, Israeli politics. And so we literally signed a book contract with a New York publisher, 999. And I was a little uncomfortable with it because you don't want to have a book title that's an inside joke. I also worried that some of my Christian friends might pick up the book and look at it upside down. It would be 666 and they'd think of the devil. I worried about my German friends, 999, far too negative. And so I'm here in Los Angeles, speaking to our mutual friend David Suissa, the editor of the LA Jewish Journal, and I'm telling him, I said, we need a title. He said, well, tell me about the book. And Natan Sharansky, this pint-sized little guy who stood up to the Soviet Union, says day after day in the Gulag, day after day in the prison camp, the KGB, the secret police, keeps telling him, you're forgotten, you're abandoned. And he says, no, I knew I was never alone. And Suissa says, that's it. For 75 years, we've been talking about never again. And of course, we have to remember, especially after October 7th, never again. But when you're a part of the Jewish people, what did you say? You're never alone. We're a part of this family. We're part of this community. We're part of this history. And that gives us a power. And look at the Parsha. Look at your Dvar Torah. The first half is about the sin of Nadav and Avihu, the two children of Aaron. And what did they do? They took Esh Sarah, a foreign flame, and they misused it and abused it and were consumed by the flame. But the second half, you said, is about kashrut. And we heard about holiness and about purifying. And that's the jujitsu. That's our story. We go from the negative to the positive because flame also, we entered the Shabbat with the flame of the candles, and we exit the Shabbat with the flame of Havdalah. And it says in the Parsha that we have to learn to distinguish between the holy and the profane, between the lies about us and the uncomfortable and sometimes messy truths that are required to defend a country, surrounded, as you said, by evil enemies, tunneling down, choosing to build Gaza into a fortress rather than using the beautiful seacoast to improve their people's lives and others' lives. And we have to call out the lies and say it's unacceptable. And I'm sorry to say that I'm coming to an America where there is an Esh Zarah, a foreign, bizarre, uncomfortable flame, a flame of anti-Semitism, a flame of unreason, a flame of hatred, that is truly un-American. I was walking over here to shul, and I saw on Ventura Boulevard, there's a big sign saying rat poison kills wildlife too. We need a campaign. Jew hatred kills democracies too. That flame doesn't just hurt Jews. As I argued last night, in fact, Jew hatred is the sole problem, is the sickness of the Jew hater, not the Jew. I would take the entire budget we as a Jewish community invest in fighting anti-Semitism, and I would invest instead in this synagogue, and I would invest instead in birthright. I would invest instead in building our souls and building ourselves up. And let the Jews, the non-Jews, solve the problem of Jew hatred, because it is a threat to democracy. And we see it, it's connected to this age of unreason we have, where if you dare disagree with me, I cancel you, rather than saying, let's sit and learn from one another. Let's listen together, let's reason together. My Rebbe on this, and I know we have great rabbis in the room, but my Rebbe on this is Mayor Ed Koch, the mayor of New York. I'm a New Yorker, so I had to bring in a little New York. What did he say? He said, if you agree with me on 7 of 12 things, please vote for me. If you agree with me on 12 of 12 things, please see a psychiatrist. The notion that one candidate or another candidate is either perfect or perfectly evil is toxic to democracy. And that same unreason is connected to the flame of anti-Semitism, the flame of Jew hatred, the flame of unreason, the flame of all or nothingness. On October 7th, we saw 2 really stupid, and I'm supposed to be an academic and not use words like stupid, but we saw 2 really stupid arguments killed along with so many holy souls. That ridiculous argument that has been ripping the Jewish community apart here. Which is worse, left-wing anti-Semitism or right-wing anti-Semitism? And I heard my left-wing friends yelling and screaming about Trumpian anti-Semitism and the right. And I heard my right-wing friends yelling and screaming about campus anti-Semitism and the left. Police your own. Let the left take care of those far left-wingers, those illiberal liberals, those who distort true liberal ideas and pick on the Jewish state. And let the right police those on the right who say the Jews will not replace us and pick on the Jew. And we see that in the far right and the far left, they meet because the world is round. And we saw on that day how quick some of our progressive brothers and sisters jumped on the bandwagon. They couldn't even take time to hug us, to reach out, before Israel even reacted. Israel was guilty because Israel to them is evil. It's not what Israel does, it's what Israel is. And that's unacceptable. And we've been hearing for years from the far right attacks on the Jewish people. And when you attack the Jewish state, you attack the Jew. And when you attack the Jewish people, you attack the Jew. So both of them are unacceptable. And we have to call them out and say zero tolerance for all forms of hatred. And by learning how painful it is when people hate us, we learn to love others too. We don't take the flame of our anger and turn it into a flame of discrimination or a flame of provincialism. We use it as a purifying flame to make us all better, to lift us all up. And that second ridiculous argument of, well, I really like Jews, it's just Israel I hate. And I know Jews confuse, because we are the Jewish people practicing the Jewish religion of Judaism. Our national liberation movement is Zionism, and the country that we love and the land that we love is Israel. And if we called our national liberation movement, instead of Zionism, named after that amazing hill in Jerusalem, Judeanism, and we had called Israel Judea, and we saw that Jews are in love with Judaism and Judea and Judaism, you wouldn't be able to make that silly argument. And we have to understand, what is Zionism? Zionism is the movement to establish a Jewish state because we are a Jewish people, not just a religion. We are tied to a particular homeland, Eretz Yisrael. And so we, Am Yisrael, the Jewish people, have the right, like 192 other countries, to establish a state, Medinat Yisrael, on Eretz Yisrael. And no one can take that away from us. The fact that it was voted in by the United Nations in 1947 is an added bonus. But the fact that it's in our hearts, it's in our souls, it echoes in every part of this service. It echoes, starting in the Jewish calendar from Rosh Hashanah. Do you want to take Israel out of the liturgy, take Israel out of our rituals? Then you can't have apples and honey on Rosh Hashanah. You can't sing B'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim next year in Jerusalem at the Passover Seder. It's in our DNA. It's who we are. But Zionism activated is a movement for Jewish pride. A movement, yes, I'm not afraid of the word, for Jewish power. A movement that says, well, we cannot solve the problem of anti-Semitism because that's their problem, not our problem. We know what to do. And as I argued last night, on October 7th, the government failed. And the IDF temporarily failed. But Zionism succeeded. Zionism was vindicated because it taught Israelis how to defend themselves and how to fight. And it taught this holy Jewish community that you don't get defeated. You don't raise up your hands, but you roll up your sleeves and you work and you start building a better tomorrow. And that, by the way, was the great gift. I know we have the august president of the Theodor Herzl Club here, and apparently many other people said that they were also part of the Theodor Herzl fan club. That was the great gift of Theodor Herzl. Theodor Herzl saw the flames of anti-Semitism. He was an enlightened Jew. He was part of that amazing movement in the 1800s. Come out of the ghetto. You can belong. You can fit in. You can be one of them. And he had that beautiful black beard and those piercing black eyes. And he looked in the mirror and he saw a man, very masculine, very patriarchal, very sexist moment in the late 1800s. But he was so proud. But when he was attacked as a Jew, he didn't let the flames of anti-Semitism burn him. He didn't let the flames of anti-Semitism burn his soul. Instead, he turned it around, the jujitsu, and he gave us a leap of hope that tomorrow will be better than today, that we roll up our sleeves and make it happen. Yes, we need leaps of faith, because we know how many people have God-sized holes in their heart, which comes from the great medieval philosopher Pascal, but it would make a great country song. I got a God-sized hole in my heart. But think about it. We fill that up with these amazing rituals. We fill that up with our bat mitzvah and bar mitzvah ceremonies. We fill that up with our stories. And my friends, I'm a professor, so I have to give you homework. As you start the to-do list, because also look at today, we started with the assault on tradition with Nadav and Avihu, and we end up not just with kosher laws, but with Shabbat HaChodesh. We're preparing for Pesach. So yes, there's a long list of to-dos. Get the brisket, clean the house. But I don't care how clean the house is. And I don't care how big or beautiful the brisket is. I want us to really start thinking about how do we make this the most meaningful Pesach ever, which we already started hearing about. And I want to hear from each of you, the older ones, how you are willing to testify, to tell your story, to tell your family story. Don't just tell Yetziat Mitzrayim 3,500 years ago. Each one of us here in America lived a story of leaving from Egypt, leaving from the oppressors and the poverty and the loss of elsewhere, and coming to make an amazing world. And that's, of course, also the Zionist story in Israel. And so sit and take the time. Sit and take the time to plan out a Seder, which is a journey not just of the Jewish people for 3,500 years, because you are 3,513 years old, but also a journey of our own story, how so many of you stood up and helped fight to free Natan Sharansky. Our young people don't know that story. That when you walk down the street, or your grandparents walked down the street, they didn't say, oh, there's somebody with white privilege, which is an attempt to kind of rob us of all our victories, of all our smarts, of all our success. But they said, there's a Yid, but it didn't matter because we were in an America that accepted us. And we were Generation Hope. And we have to bring that hope again, not just for our sake, but for our neighbor's sake. An America with despair doesn't work. I don't understand in America, and I don't want to get too political, which is always a way of saying I'm going to get political, but I don't understand an America where progressives don't believe in progress and conservatives don't conserve institutions. And we need to start learning together and rebuilding together here in America and in Israel. And so today is a Shabbat of hope. And today is a Shabbat of redemption. And today is a Shabbat where we look at our brothers and sisters in Israel and say, you're never alone, and we're with you. And we know it's going to be ugly, and we know it's going to be complicated. We may not be popular, but we are right. And we're going to learn more. And we also look at one another and say, we're so lucky that we're never alone. Shabbat Shalom, Mazal Tov.